my framework has always been body partnership, like to, instead of like, what can I do to my body? It's not like a doing to, kind of like in parenting. We're not doing to, we're working with our kids to come up with solutions to everyday challenges. And same thing with my body, when like a symptom that feels uncomfortable or I just don't love that's popping up. It's not like, how can I fix this? But it's like, okay, what do you need from me? Like, where am I missing what it is that you are trying to communicate? And how can we get back on the same page?
Welcome to the Well-Nourished Mother podcast. This is a show for women who desire a deeper, more mindful and meaningful pregnancy, birth, and motherhood experience. In this space, we bring so much reverence to the rite of passage that is the maiden to mother journey. I'm your host, Lauren Fortuna Flock, founder of Nest and Nourish. I'm an ex-nurse turned birth worker, holistic nutritionist, and somatic coaching student with a fiery passion for birth prep and motherhood prep that blends the head and the heart. Join me for inspiring conversations with experts, mothers, and all-around badass wise women, exploring all the ways we can nourish ourselves, body, mind, and heart, in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. This space will help you cultivate the knowledge, practices, and resources you need to be the most embodied, vibrant, authentic, intuitive, and well-nourished mother you deserve to be. So welcome. Let's do this. Welcome back to episode 12 of The Well-Nourished Mother. Today, I am chatting with the oh-so-passionate Erica Worth. She is the creator and founder of Worth Wellness, host of the Crunchy Mom Club podcast, mother to one, stepmom to one, and wife. After embarking on her own health reclamation adventure after years of chronic illness, mental health crisis, and burnout, she decided it was time to take healing into her own hands and get to know her body as brilliant, not broken. Through the power of herbs, food as medicine, reconnecting to nature, and incorporating daily mindful movement and energy hygiene practices, she achieved a state of vitality and was able to get pregnant naturally and free birth her first baby boy at home with only her partner and mother present. Now she supports women on their motherhood path to embrace their bodies as wise, stay in sync with the rhythms of the earth, and nourish both themselves and their young in the most natural way possible. In addition to her podcast, she offers one-to-one coaching support for expecting moms through the early years of mothering. Erica has such a beautiful story of personal healing, growth, and really stepping into her power as a woman and as a mother. So in this episode, we kind of touch on it all. Her personal healing journey, how she prioritizes wellness and self-care. She shares about her wild pregnancy and free birth and the mindset and emotional aspects involved in making these kind of truly aligned personal decisions. And she shares her story all within the context of what she calls body partnership. I love this concept. So it's this idea that instead of working against or doing to our bodies, we're shifting our mindset and working with our bodies and the symptoms and signals and communication that our bodies are sending us. And I think this simple mindset shift is actually quite profound. The way we think about our bodies matters. So by shifting from this idea that we need to fix or do something to our bodies to this idea that we're really working with and in this beautiful dance with our bodies. It's so simple really, but so beautiful. So I can't wait for you to hear more about this in this episode. So as always, if you like what you hear and what I'm sharing in this show, please share some love by rating or reviewing the show wherever you're listening from, or share it with someone you know that would love it. It all truly helps this project bloom and grow, and I'm so grateful for your support. One silly little thing I wanted to point out. At one point, you'll hear Erica mention my own forgetfulness. And what happened in this episode, which honestly happens in just about every single one, like every single recording, is I totally lost my train of thought as I was talking. And I went on this like minute and a half long search for my thoughts. It was kind of hilarious, but while I was editing, I totally cut it out before getting to the part where Erica has her own little version of this, and we laugh about it and poke fun at our ailing memories. But yeah, I'm wishing I had left my own lapse of memory in there. But I couldn't find it after cutting it out. And honestly, I didn't have the time to start over. So I'm leaving hers in. Erica, I hope you don't mind. I think it's a beautiful reminder that we are human over here. We're not on some pedestal. We're not perfect. We are going for connection over perfection, as my good friend Nicole Pasveer likes to say. So I will definitely leave more of those funny and real and raw parts in moving forward. All right, let's get into it. Before we dive in, my favorite question I ask everyone, can you share a word or phrase to describe your current season or phase of motherhood?
Oh, it's such a juicy question. Word or phrase? Let's see. Lately, as of like this week, it's just been like savor this moment. Like I step outside of it's almost as if I'm like a little spirit flying around like in my house looking at an experience my son and I are having. Like yesterday, I drink some sort of elixir cacao kind of thing in the afternoon. And he's old enough now to join me for like a little sip. And so we were sitting on the kitchen floor and he was sipping out of, his little coffee cup, a little tiny bit of my elixir next to me. And I just thought like, this is what I dreamed of. Like as a little girl to have a real, a baby that's yours sitting next to you, drinking tea with you. It's like, it just doesn't get any more beautiful than that. And like, just to pause and hold that for a second, because I keep seeing all these memes on Instagram about when you're 80 years old, what you're going to dream about, or the days we were kids were like 1 year old running around just like gleeful all the time. And even though there's really hard moments, and even yesterday we had some really challenging emotional moments, there were still those beautiful moments. And so to just like savor them and hold them like so dear to my heart. So that's what I've been focusing on, just the day to day as of late with my son.
I love that. Those moments are so precious, and it's so easy to get so like wrapped up in all of it, the challenges of it, the day-to-day stuff, that you can sometimes forget to just pause and like notice them and take them in and savor them, like you're saying. Yeah, that's beautiful. So can you briefly tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I am deeply passionate about going back to nature's blueprint for mothering and for like caring for myself and for my infant. And so that's been a journey I first had to go on by myself years before conceiving my son, to get my body into a place of balance and harmony, and even to a place that was welcoming to a child. And as I got closer and closer to the conception portal, I started to get really strong senses that my baby, if you know about spirit babies, I'm recently really nerding out on that, but like spirit, I could sense his spirit so close before he came in. And through my process of pregnancy, which was mainly wild and not under like any specific kind of overhead medical team, I really learned like what it meant to commune with my baby, to check in and tune in, and to really follow his guidance and his intuition as well as mine, to create what would be a birth setting that would be optimal for both of us. And so, yeah, I'm really passionate about all of that because I've just gone through it. But on the bigger scale, like when I'm not deep into how to nourish myself and my baby, just in the day to day, which can be quite challenging if you have, 0 to 1, you're not sleeping, you're barely getting a minute to shower. It's not the time where you think, oh yeah, I really invest a lot in my health. But at the same time, how important is it that our children see that putting our bodies and the care of them as top importance? Like they need to see that. I wrote about it recently, but I was in the grocery store last week and I had really like a native Italian grandfather stop me and just like have this profound moment in the coconut oil aisle. And he basically, his message was like, little kids become like who it is that is guiding them. That's just the point blank what happens. And I'm like, if I'm always rushing around, barely having time to brush my hair or shower or stretch because I feel like my son always needs me, what is that? What message about womanhood, what message about humanity is like that sending to him? And so I think like now more than ever, because there are eyes watching, like I have such a big commission to figure out a new rhythm in motherhood. It doesn't look the same, but a new rhythm and a new way forward of caring for myself. And my framework has always been body partnership, like to, instead of like, what can I do to my body? It's not like a doing to, kind of like in parenting. We're not doing to, we're working with our kids to come up with solutions to everyday challenges. And same thing with my body, when like a symptom that feels uncomfortable or I just don't love that's popping up. It's not like, how can I fix this? But it's like, okay, what do you need from me? Like, where am I missing what it is that you are trying to communicate? And how can we get back on the same page? So that's probably not actually a nutshell. That's really lengthy, but that's what I'm into. I love supporting people on that path, whether they're a mom or not, but specifically women, because we have a unique physiology and the female body that is cyclical and beautiful. And so I offer support for people who are into those things.
So much to dive into there. Oh my gosh. I loved what you said about body partnership. That really stuck with me. So working with the body versus doing to the body. We're going to touch on that more in a second. But first, can you take us back to kind of the beginning of your journey? I hate the word journey sometimes, but to your journey of kind of reclaiming your health and starting to, focus on more of a holistic wellness kind of perspective. Can you take us back to the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. So my healing journey started 3 months into getting married. I married a man who at the time had a 3-year-old, and I was working full time, 8 to 5, became an instant mom overnight. And it was so much. My body had been sending me signals long before that. In my single years, I had insomnia really intensely, depression, anxiety, even found it hard to just get up and go to work every day. I would have panic attacks like on my way to work. So I wasn't doing great before that. But at that point, I added on so many layers of responsibility and pressure because the situation with my stepson and his biological mother was really intense. And so there was a lot of pressure for me to kind of swoop in and be the hero for everybody. And I just collapsed. I would go to work. I was working, like I said, full time. I would go to work, and on the weekends, I would basically be bedridden. And at the time, I was like 25. And so I knew that this was not normal for a 25-year-old to barely make it through work and then be in bed and sick all over the weekend. And I missed so many like holiday gatherings that first year of marriage. I couldn't go to Easter, 4th of July. Again, I was in bed sick. And a lot of that had to do around like it was manifesting in my gut. And it got to the point where I couldn't digest food really. I had extreme abdominal pain and everything just made me feel awful. And so at the same time, my husband had a really severe back injury, and he was told surgery was the only thing that would fix it, but he didn't want to go that route. And so he actually found someone who was doing ozone injections in our area. And ozone is a gas that it's a natural gas. It's what makes the rain smell so good. That's ozone in the air being released as a result of all the chemicals that make a rainstorm. I'm not a weather person, so don't ask me more about that. But basically, ozone's kind of miraculous. You can get in vitro ozone that could, some people use it for cancer treatment. I actually used it in pregnancy again because I got a tick bite and was starting to manifest Lyme symptoms. And so I went in and got IV ozone, and it cleared it up almost immediately. And so we found this like miracle, one of nature's miracle medicines. And I would go to those appointments and sit in there and listen to this doctor who had a completely different paradigm for healing than what I had been exposed to as a kid. And I started to talk to him about some of the things I was experiencing. He's like, I think I can help you. And I was like, okay, well, let's give it a try. And so I thought I was going to go in and just get a couple supplements and be on my way. And the first questions he started to ask me were not really even about my symptoms, but were emotional questions, like do you feel like there are emotions that you've locked up and closed the door and won't look in, like to that room, lost the key kind of thing? Because now I understand that the brain gut connection is a real thing. And so much of the chemicals that make us feel good are actually produced in our gut. And so that was the start of me thinking deeper and not just about, okay, here's all the things wrong with me. And I felt like my body had betrayed me for so many years. Like, why can't I just function like a normal person? And then in reality, it was that I was living in a way that was not conducive to my body being able to thrive. I had really poor sleep hygiene. On a deeper level, I was a people pleaser. I was highly codependent in relationships. I just kind of gave at the expense of myself to the point where I had nothing left. Like I was completely depleted. And so there was a lot of layers to the symptoms I was experiencing. But as I dove deeper into building in more mindfulness practices and starting to say no and have limits and set boundaries around my life, the issues with my gut started to resolve. My sleep completely resolved. I could sleep through the night again. And it was these simple things, but often what really makes the difference is when we go deeper and understand why is it that we got to where we did, not just the little like supplements that do help and can be supportive. But yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of my journey. And I mean, it's ever evolving because we shift and change at different life phases. Now I'm not sleeping again through the night. I haven't for the last year because I'm a mom. And so I'm sure there'll be stuff to adjust and kind of get back into once that chapter is closed, if it ever is. Moms tell me different things about that. So anyways,
it will.
Good.
There's hope.
I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Yes.
That's such an important piece, what you're saying about, how once you got to those layers underneath, the emotional layers underneath, and you were able to tend to, your boundaries, being able to say no, your people-pleasing tendencies. That's the layer that I'm really interested in too, because even in the online like birth world, there's so much that's like, oh, you need to stand up for yourself in birth. You need to stand up for your birth choices. You need to voice your desires and voice your needs. And you need to, whatever other million messages are out there. But nobody's talking about the fact that there's reasons that people can't do this. There's reasons that women find this so hard. And what are those reasons? What is the layer before or underneath that we're not touching? And that's kind of the layer that I'm really interested in. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned this because it's such an important piece, right? Healing those layers is what's going to allow for so much change in the outward world and in your environment and in, the decisions you make, right?
Oh yeah, that is so, I had never thought of it in the context of birth, but you bring up such a good point because, you think about why some home births work for some people and why they don't for others, and what actually makes a transfer happen, and how most of the time the stats that I'm reading are not that it's actually a physical emergency. It's like mental burnout, exhaustion from the mom. And so I even think about what you're saying, probably having years before really worked on, especially just the idea of people being displeased with things like choices I've made for my life that I feel resonate with who I am and align with me, but they don't fit for other people. And when I chose to do a free birth, I did keep it to myself primarily because I knew that people will probably have very strong opinions about that. But even as I started to let some people in who did express their opinions, that didn't touch me. At that point, I had become so confident in like, I know this is what's right and it's okay. Sometimes what's right does not always feel like the most supported decision by other people, and that's okay. So that plays a big role in birth. And I agree that it's not talked about enough when we think about birthing and freedom or, free birth and that kind of stuff. That's such an important piece that cannot be overlooked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In any birth, I'd say, not just, hospital birth, especially, right? Because you're kind of like gearing up for war in that case. And that's, at least the feeling that it is right now when, the rates of birth trauma are so high. Can you share with us a bit about what led to your decision to have a wild pregnancy and free birth your baby? What was going on in your head? Why did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I think most moms, when they, if they've been wanting to get pregnant and they see those pink lines, like they want to do the absolute best for that baby. They want to provide it the best start in life. And so for me, already having done a lot of work before I conceived and just reading about all the different birth interventions, I read a lot of books that gave like the pros and the cons. So you had that full consent that I think is often missing in the realm of pregnancy interventions and birth interventions. And so I felt educated about my choices, but then I also knew just for me personally, I'm not been ever been someone who enjoyed going to the doctor. I've always preferred a more holistic approach. Well, in the last several years. And as a teen, I actually was very sick as a teenager as well. I battled an eating disorder for over a decade. And so I would end up in the ER often with like pain in my stomach. And they would always run all these tests and be like, oh, she's fine, and send me on my merry way. And so I didn't ever really trust the mainstream medical system, to be honest. And then it's like, now I have a baby. I'm not sure I trust them with this precious baby that I've been just longing for. And so I was skeptical to begin with, but I did hire a midwife at the beginning, and my plan was to birth at home because that's where I feel more comfortable. And she was great. I mean, I went to my appointments. I didn't have a whole lot with her because she was working, we were paying out of pocket, and she was working with kind of what we could do at the time. And as she would give me the information on the interventions at each kind of week of pregnancy, and I would read into them, and I was like declining all of them. And she's like, it kind of felt like, well, why am I here for her? Like, okay, so you kind of just want to birth by yourself and do this all by yourself. So like, why am I here kind of thing? And so I was kind of like, yeah, that's a good point. And then at like 33, 32 weeks, I listened to a podcast about, I think it was Yolanda Norris Clark. She was on some podcast, and I listened to her story, and she's like free birthed 9 children, I think, at this point. And I just thought to myself, like, when I heard that, something just like struck me at the core. I was like, this is what I've always wanted, but I just never knew was even possible. I've never even heard of this. And so then I started down the rabbit hole with the Free Birth Society podcast and heard all of these stories, not of people who have birthed 9 times, because I kind of wrote her off too at the same time, because I'm like, well, I'm not on my 8th or 9th birth. I have no experience. Like, can I actually do this? And then I heard these stories of women doing this with their first child, and women doing it with twins and breech births all over the world. And they were just normal people. And I thought to myself, I was like, there is nothing about them that I don't have. Like, we're all just normal women. And other than there was a very strong thread of kind of this mental strength that I heard, that I sensed like through the earphones, about it took just like a mental level of mental fortitude and self-responsibility and ownership. And really this exit of like birth being some sort of, medical emergency that needs intervention. Most of the time, that's not the case. And so that was another thread, because I do think our culture is so fed all these messages about birth being this kind of panic situation all the time. And that doesn't really help us when we are desiring to birth outside of the medical system and are hoping for it to be smooth and, as physiologically normal as possible. So anyways, that started to just pique my interest, and I brought it up to my partner, and he didn't write it off, which was really surprising to me. I was like, oh, like, this doesn't sound scary to you? And he had questions, but he was open to it, which to me was a kind of another green light. I was like, okay. And yeah, then as I just continued to do more research and listen to more stories, I just felt like really confident that it was right for me and my baby, because we also had such a smooth like pregnancy, and I just didn't have any reason or fear to think that something was going to go wrong. Now, I know anything can happen in birth. And so I did have, to the degree that I felt I needed, some sort of, in my mind, I had run through what I might do if this situation or that happened. But I also didn't want to go overboard with contingency planning, because I think manifestation is really real. And if you spend all your time planning for what ifs, they'll probably all happen. So it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of had to balance that. But that's kind of, yeah, that's how I got to free birth.
I love that. I had so many thoughts to so many threads to pull on. I find that most of the women, this is a huge generalization, but most of the women that I hear of that choose free birth do the most research, right? They're so informed, they're so educated. And I think choosing free birth, or even home birth for that matter, I think it either it attracts the type of woman that wants to do all that research and wants to know how everything works and wants to know what to do in an emergency, or it kind of forces you to do that so that you are prepared for, whatever happens. And it's funny, you were talking about, birth not as a medical event. I just saw a stat somewhere, probably Instagram, and I think it was about Canada. And I'm probably going to butcher this, so someone call me out if I do, if I'm making this up right now. But it said something like the highest rate of hospitalization in Canada is for childbirth, which is like, that's crazy. So the highest rate of hospitalization is due to childbirth. And as if childbirth is the like major medical need in this country. Like, that's crazy. That just goes to show that in our culture, we view childbirth as a medical event that needs to happen in hospital with practitioners.
Like, that's, if I understand what you're saying, right, that's the number one reason, like statistically, that people check into the hospital. It's like for births.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So crazy.
Like not accidents, not trauma. Birth.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in preparing for your free birth, what was your mindset like? What was what was the emotional, did you have to prepare emotionally in any way? And I know that you had kind of done that for so long before coming to your pregnancy, which is so amazing, because I think for a lot of women, pregnancy and the idea of birth is what kind of ignites that little bit of healing and starting to dig deeper into their own, stuff. At least it was for me. I wasn't really paying attention to much of that before. And then all of a sudden I got pregnant and I was like, oh, I've got some work to do. So for you, what was involved, on the emotional realm or in the mindset realm when it came to your free birth?
Before I went through it, I would have had a totally different answer. And then what I think about it now is different. And I've talked about this on some more recent podcasts, but going into it, my thought process was I do as much reading and study as I can on all of the positive approaches to birth. So like we're talking hypnobirthing, orgasmic birth practices, any and every kind of technique to sort of what I feel like what's marketed in those approaches is this, like, you get to surpass pain, like all pain, and that sounded so appealing to me. I was like, I mean, of course, to who does that not sound appealing, so that was my approach too, is like, I don't want to see birth as this problem or go into it thinking it's going to be really painful. I want to entertain the idea that it could be pleasurable and smooth and pain-free. Well, that was all in great. That was wonderful. But in some ways, I feel like it did me a really disservice for what the experience actually is like, because I didn't then have a framework for what to do when it was intense, because it was going to be intense. And I got there and I felt so sidelined and shocked by the bigness of the sensations and how it felt impossible actually to access some of these other ideas I had been reading about in the moment. I had really intense back labor too. So that was just excruciating during, each of the surges. I was not planning for that either. So I think probably I will put this in here. There's different people have different ideas about free birth. Some want to do it completely by themselves, like women by themselves in a room. Other people want a couple supportive loved ones around them. And I think in my experience, what I was not prepared for was the intensity of the feelings and sensations. And then having people, my mom and my husband were the two that I had with me, wanting them to like do something about it. Like it was that sense of that I think like this is more spiritual, like we go through in our lives before we really step into our own power and ownership of like, save me from birth. Like, can't you do something? Mm-hmm. But really the only person who could do it was me. Like I was the only person who could take myself through that. I was the only person that was going to birth that baby and breathe the baby out. And so I think playing with next time when I go into it, playing with what can I do to really sink into that this is normal. I don't need saved from this. How can I work with birth? If you're to personify her, like she's really big, and how can I surrender more to her and lean into and follow her lead? Instead of, I think I resisted it a lot because the pain was so shocking that I think it probably caused me to experience more struggle because I kind of braced myself against it at every surge. And I've heard that the more you relax into it, the easier it can be. So yeah, I guess that would be kind of that's what I did to prepare. But now I think I'd probably do something a little bit different now that I know what birth is actually like.
Totally. I actually had a similar experience. So I prepared for a home birth and I did all the educating, the unlearning. I learned about hypnobirthing. I called it waves, not contractions. I was fully prepared to not experience pain and just, experience intensity. And honestly, I feel like, yeah, for me, that did me a huge disservice because when the time came, I had only back labor. I had earth-shattering, hip-breaking labor. I felt nothing in the front or down low, nothing. It was all in my hips and it felt like they were literally ripping apart. And I was not prepared for that. I was like, of course I knew that back labor was an option, but you don't go into it expecting that to happen, right? And I feel like it did me a disservice. And I feel like sometimes this idea that, birth can be pain-free and orgasmic, it's great, but I think there's also this tone sometimes from some people that if it is painful, you're doing it wrong, or you've done something wrong, or there's something wrong with you. And if you did have trouble, it's your fault. And there's a big difference between being shamed and just feeling shame. Of course, like I can take self-responsibility for that. But yeah, I just feel like that the whole pain-free birth thing sometimes can kind of set you up for failure if you're not prepared. And I think on a deeper level, it's about being able to surrender, like you've kind of said, surrender to the sensations and not fight against them. Yeah. So this piece about surrendering, I think again, we hear about it so much and it's so hard to know what that actually means. Like, how do you actually surrender? What does that feel like? What does that look like in your body? Is it just like going with the flow and letting anything happen? Or, how do we create that safety in our body or in our nervous system to be able to surrender and know that we're safe, even though this like intense thing is happening in our body for potentially the first time. We've never experienced it before. So how do we kind of like, this is what I think about, how do we train our nervous systems to, yeah, like have that safety and know that it's all okay?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind, just because I've learned a lot more about it in this past year postpartum, is just the power of our words and how our words create reality. And I think it's okay to like call things what they are, because I did the dance around calling things like waves to try to sidestep contractions and being closed. But like, I think what sort of like mantra and like using your voice for as an expression of that surrender could be helpful. That's one of the things that I thought of. So I know whether that's like I needed some sort of like recording or a tape or something that had some of the like birth affirmations that would remind me like this is normal. I mean, because I started to at one point in my birth, because I had nobody checking my cervix for dilation and nobody telling me, oh, you're in this phase now, in that phase. I have no idea when I entered what, but I think now I was probably in the crowning phase because my son had come through a little bit, but we couldn't get him like past that point, or I couldn't, I was the one in labor. So, but he was just, it felt like for a very long time, he was stuck there. And I did start to have like all of those thoughts of like, oh my gosh, now, I mean, like, what am I going to do? Is he going to always, like, is he forever going to be stuck there? Am I going to have to call an ambulance and my entire birth plan is just like shattered? And I think having one of the things I think I want next time is a birth keeper of some sort there who has experienced a lot of births and knows what to say to encourage women through some of those tough points, who are unmedicated, who are wanting to do it empowered, who don't want to just like, okay, fine, take over, do whatever kind of thing. I want to still be very active in my birth, but I think it would have been helpful to have another person there who has been through this with a lot of women and knows what to say that can be those words like medicine that gives me like, that helps to support like me find my inner strength and keep going. Just like, I mean, if you think about ancestrally, I've talked about this with other women. It probably is more accurate that women birthed in a community of a lot of other sisters and elders and women of multi-generation. Like this thought of even just like them and their partner is probably not super normal, like ancestrally. And so, I mean, like what kind of sisters and like female energetic support could I have put around myself that would have even helped me take my mind off of it. I mean, that was the thing too. I was so focused, laser focused on this labor thing that I think that could have amplified the pain too, because I had no one else there to kind of bring lightheartedness to the moments or anything. So it just was at night intense in my bedroom the entire time, So it was like, I don't know. I just think there could have been maybe that's some of the things I've thought about maybe doing differently, but for sure, maybe having somebody there who has more experience just to even help me anchor in and mentally remind myself, like, this is normal. You're doing an amazing job. Like, just keep at it. Yeah.
Yeah. That anchor. I love that word, because that's really, I think what we need in those moments, right? Someone to anchor us to the present moment so that we can surrender and dive deep and go into the birth world, the birth realm, the birth portal, whatever you want to call it. Knowing that someone is kind of holding the space for you, ensuring, not ensuring that you're safe, but more on like a energetic level that, you're safe in the environment. If we think of ourselves, as the mammals that we are, right? Most, find a safe environment to go and birth. And they can only do that. Like birth can complete, or labor can completely stop if something kind of alerts their nervous system that there's a threat, right? So just having someone there with that wisdom that can anchor into the space, into the moment. I love that. And like you said, in history, I think we've birthed in community. And I saw something recently, again, probably on Instagram, and it was a big kind of like, whoa, like perspective shift. And it said something about, do some women choose free birth because they are, unable to accept help, or they're, really deep into that, like that wound of being, not wanting any outside help, wanting to be hyper independent.
Or not able to trust anybody. Maybe they have like a deep fear of trusting anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just found that to be such a like that's so interesting, because it's true. There's so many extremes right now, right? I mean, always there are extremes, but I think in the like online birth world, there's definitely extremes where it's like you have to free birth by yourself like a true mammal, or, or it's not real birth. And then there's like, no, you need the full medical intervention to be safe, air quotes, safe. So yeah, we get the whole gamut, but I just found that to be a really kind of interesting perspective shift.
Yeah, I heard somebody say that like the two most hot button topics you could bring up are politics and birth. And I am like, that's really true. Like when you go deep into it. Yeah, let's add that to the list. Totally. I'm like, yeah, there are so many different opinions and viewpoints on and extremes. I would agree with that. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's important to do what you feel in a clean, energetic is like, this feels resonant and right for me, with the looseness of grip that if something were to shift, you could also shift. And if you sense that you couldn't shift, even if it seemed like you needed to, that might alert you to like, what are your real reasons for doing this? Is it clean? Is it not clean energetically? And I did really feel like I would know if it needed to shift and my baby needed something else or more support. So that's how I came to it. But
how do you think your birth experience has affected your mothering?
I think that it's from a physiological level, we know that when we don't interfere with the hormones of birth, it does set women up for a smoother postpartum, even potentially lowering their risk of postpartum depression and anxiety when you're not interfering or adding drugs like synthetic drugs to that mix. Also, that it helps with breastfeeding relationships and bonding and things like that. So because I don't know what the alternative is, I've not experienced that. It's hard for me to know what it could have been like if I hadn't done the free birth. But I think like it set me up for a deeply intuitive way of mothering. And I mean, there is nothing more empowering than like birthing a baby. I mean, seriously. So I think that for me, in that context that I experienced it, it felt so miraculous that my body could not only birth the baby, but like I held him in my arms the first time. I just thought, how is this even possible that my body made a human being in there? Like, what? Like, I still couldn't, even though it was like inside me, I couldn't even wrap my brain around it. And I think that just gave me so much trust in like what can happen without me always trying to like be in control of everything. Because so much of, I mean, yes, you create the environment in your body where your baby can thrive and grow and all of that during pregnancy. And then you set that up in birth. But at the end of the day, like I realized I could trust my body's guidance and my intuition because we just did this marathon and now my baby's here and I didn't know how to breastfeed. I didn't know how to do anything really. And yet it just happened. It just happened. Eventually he figured out how to latch. Eventually we got it down. It seemed like we would never get it down. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I went through the first 2 weeks of like toe curling pain every time he latched, but then it just resolved. And it's the same thing with like finding our way with co-sleeping and all of that. I think our bodies are so resilient and there is a component of bringing kids into the world that our bodies were designed to do this. And it just clicks when you're willing to just go slow and trust the process and be patient. I think with a lot of those things, because women today don't necessarily have a lot of support around it, we quit before it could get good. We quit before it could get smoother. And I understand that because it often can be pretty bumpy at the beginning, especially with things like nursing and that sort of thing. But I think, yeah, my birth played a big role in helping me just even like if you think about just the cycle of birth and how someone told me later, I think it was either before, I can't remember if it was actually before or after, just like no woman has ever been in labor forever. That never has happened. Like it is something that ends. And just like remembering that in mothering, I think is people tell you and again, when you're in a really challenging phase, like this is going to pass though. You will, like you just said in this interview, like you will eventually sleep through the night again. That's not going to last your entire life. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And even like for me coming up on, I'm just feeling this, like our weaning journey might be starting with my son. It's like, okay, it feels like this has been such a huge part of my life for the last year. And I couldn't imagine like going back to life without nursing. And now I'm almost there again. So, I mean, it's like, it's such these are chapters and the page turns and the book ends and it's not forever. So
yeah, I'd say the book doesn't end.
It doesn't ever end. Okay. Yeah. I like that.
But the page turns and there's new chapters, new phases for sure. And like when we don't fight against our physiology, I feel like, when we don't fight against our physiology or try to control it, I think that's when we can find so much more ease, especially with things like co-sleeping and breastfeeding. I think, we try to control these things so much. And I think that's where so much struggle comes from, when it comes to newborn sleep and feeding. I think, when we're trying to deny our physiology and what is the most natural, we're creating so many more conflicts and problems for ourselves. I'd love to shift gears for a second. I want to hear about the work that you do. So I know you've called yourself a body partnership coach. I'd love to hear about the work that you do and how it applies to mothers.
Yeah, I think the ideas of body partnership and the concepts that I developed long before my son came on board have really informed how I have been able to navigate, especially with a history of an eating disorder, navigate just even how much your body shifts and changes. And this idea of like going back to how you were before, I'm like, I have grown so much and I don't want like what I've been through to not affect me because it's made me a deeper, wiser woman in so many ways. And so if that means like my body shifting and getting to know her in a different way, that's amazing. And so I think that it's really the work of body partnership has played a big role in me opening up my heart to my body in this new phase and what caring for her looks like. And I mean, it's so tempting. Like just even recently, I was looking at someone's Instagram account who has several kids and like them getting into like competition body ready mode. And I just thought to myself, like, I can't look at stuff like that because like, I just think there's so much pressure for women to look as if they never had children. And I don't know why that is. Why do we need, like, is it because we disvalue the role of mother that we have to somehow like, it's just really praised and celebrated if you can look like you've never had children. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with having children. What's wrong with looking like you've had children? I don't get it. And so I think body partnership though, like has helped me be like, okay, wait, that's not for you. Maybe that is that person's goals and they're doing their, you know, their best life is that. But for me, I know I need to just stay in the softening and this, I mean, sometimes that's physically too, but for me, after giving birth, I really wanted to focus on strength because I felt, especially in my gut, I just felt unstable in a lot of ways. And because I chose attachment parenting, a lot of different attachment parenting methods, I was baby wearing constantly, the co-sleeping, like we've talked about, the nursing. I had really extreme like shoulder pain. I was getting headaches every single week, like debilitating headaches. And so I just felt like I was kind of falling apart. And that for me was not, I didn't feel like I could show up as the best mother for my son when I was in chronic pain and having headaches all the time. So my focus really has been on like strengthening my body, but in a way that does not feel harsh and doesn't feel like, you know, you have to look a certain way or weigh a certain thing or whatever. But like, I would just want to feel strong and I'll know when I've gotten there. And yeah, so like not at the cost of my sanity, basically, or at like the obsession of trying to get to a certain number, measurement, or marker. And I mean, that's really tough. That is really tough, especially for someone who has the history that I have. And probably a lot of moms have been there. But once again, like reminding myself, my son is watching and he sees me on my mat doing stretches and yoga and he, you know, tries to do it himself. And it's like, I do want him to see I'm investing in my health, but not obsessing over my appearance or trying to look like he didn't come into the world or whatever it is. So I don't know, that can probably be kind of triggering for people. So I hope that you hear my heart in saying all of that, but that's just like really vulnerably what's been coming up for me a lot and how I just go back to the body partnership. Like I'm coaching a gal right now who actually is several steps ahead of me in motherhood. She has a son who's in his teen years. And it's such a good reminder for me as I'm walking through the body partnership principles with her of like, what's really at the heart of these symptoms that we're experiencing, whether that is headaches or whether that is back pain or whatever, getting down to the energetic imbalance that's going on. Because a lot of the times when we go there, the symptom resolves itself. And I think that is just always such a good reminder. And I love doing this work with other women because it reminds me to be accountable, to be like, yes, Erica, like, don't get fixated on this one symptom that you're having now. Like, go deeper, do your work, ask your questions. Like, I think that is just one of the things that I love about it. And I hope like you, I definitely have had memory challenges since having a baby. So I can't even remember your initial question at this point. I know it's about body partnerships, something. So
I love it. No, honestly, it makes me feel so good that it's not just me.
It's not. It's so not.
I had asked kind of about the work that you do as a body partnership coach. So I love the kind of tangent we went on there. I'd love to know, you know, as we kind of wind down here, what are some of the kind of wellness tools or practices that you incorporate into your daily routine as a mother that help you navigate motherhood and help you stay well nourished?
Oh, there are so many. Yeah. So one of the things as my son has gotten older that I've been able to do, because he will sleep with my partner in the mornings a little bit longer if I get him like set up, nursed and all of that, is I go out into our living room and I do like 15 to 30 minutes of yoga. And I tune in whatever my body needs. Often it's not like a vinyasa flow. It's maybe a little bit more yin style or just restorative stretching. That to me is like as important as drinking water, which I actually do drink a full glass of water with electrolytes first thing. Like I stumble in the dark out to my kitchen and do that before yoga. And that's essential. And then I'll usually close that with like a meditation or a little bit of breath work. And then I actually get started on my work because my brain is most alert in the morning and I feel the sharpest. So I'll work on my podcast or answer messages back from my coaching client. And yeah, so that's kind of my morning until my son wakes up and he's just ready to go. And sweet smiling face is like, it's go time. So, but throughout the day, some of the things that have really helped me is putting on music, like while I'm cooking and dancing with my son. First of all, in the last couple months, I've tried to wean him off of the baby wearing situation because he's so big now. And, he is a kangaroo baby. I mean, he would be Velcroed onto me at all times, but I just found kind of like when people decide that their nursing journey is ending, I do think you reach this point, and people don't talk about this in the attachment parenting world. I feel like it's a lot of pressure to like wear your baby till they're 5 or something. And it's like, if that literally doesn't feel good for you and you feel like resentful towards your child, I don't think that's better. I don't think it is. And so I've tried to slowly wean him off of me wearing him so much. And I think it's going pretty smoothly. But one thing that has helped is to put on music, and he loves to dance like while I'm cooking instead of wearing him. I sing a lot with him. I think that when I start to feel myself, because a lot of this, yes, there's physical nourishing things you can do, but those to me feel like, I mean, that's just so ingrained for me that it's not something I think about a whole lot. But the part that I've had to think about a lot in kind of as he grows into toddlerhood is the nervous system regulation pieces. That is where I feel like if I am not tending to my nervous system health, that really sets the tone for if like the day is going to go is going to be very stressful or peaceful. So some of these times where I know him and we might have a clash, that's where I really up my game of how can I ground myself? Singing actually activates the vagal nerve. So that is really a great way, even if you don't sing good, like it's a great way to calm you down. And I have found that just to start singing when things feel intense, and it calms him down too. Singing or dancing, putting on music, those are really helpful for me. I do use things on occasion, like pulse things in like the emotional freedom technique, which is tapping on acupressure points around your body while stating positive affirmations. And that if I have a big thing that happened, like even yesterday, there was this like big misunderstanding and stuff. I'm like, if I need to clear something big, that is really helpful too. And I mean, another thing I've tried to do, it doesn't happen every day, but after I put my son to bed at night, if I can kind of sneak back out, often I fall asleep with him. But if I don't, I'll come back out and I'll try to do just like 10 minutes of journaling and reflecting. The gal who wrote The Secret talks about the practice of like reimagining your day as if like everything went well. What would that have looked like if like best case scenario happened, so that you close your day not focusing on everything going wrong, but like what it could have been. And then also tomorrow, think about what's on your agenda and write out the best case scenario for it, how it could go if it went the best way possible. What would that look like? And so that's felt really good too. When I can do that, I feel like that's a really great way to set me up for a little bit deeper sleep. And then I also love to diffuse essential oils that can really set a tone for your home too. And I mean, lavender at night, I dream a lot better. I just have more vivid dreams, and I've played around with different daytime ones too, to help set the tone for me and my son, because we're in our house so much. And I think just lastly would be getting out in nature. I mean, that if you're hitting a wall and just like feeling toddler craziness, at least for my son, if his feet are in the dirt, like he goes outside, he's instantly just calm and chill. And that would entertain him for hours. So we prioritize nature walks every day, and then just free roaming. Like I kind of, when we're on the walks, I determine how long they are and where we go, but then I also try to give him just like free range time too, because that's what he loves. So those are some of the daily things and habits, rituals that we do.
And what I'm hearing is that it's really about prioritizing these things for yourself, right? It's so easy to learn about them all, but it's the actual taking the action and prioritizing yourself. And kind of going back to what you were saying about the attachment parenting world, sometimes it's like, it's these messages that you have to, in a sense, like sacrifice yourself in the name of attachment. But what we're doing in those cases, especially if there's, something coming up, for example, with me, it was with ending breastfeeding. I knew that it needed to start coming to a close because my nervous system was getting so activated with pain. Her latch just degraded for whatever reason, and it was painful every single time she would nurse. And it's like, on one hand, if we ignore these primal needs to breastfeed in the first place or to co-sleep in the first place, that's one thing. But if we're ignoring the primal need to end those things as well, I think that's just as bad. Not bad, but you know what I mean. It's the same thing. You're ignoring your own needs in the name of something else. And how is that ever good for your child, right? How is not setting boundaries on your own body, on your own wellness and needs, not ever a good thing, So I've loved what you said there. So many great options. And yeah, summing it all up, it's all about prioritizing yourself and taking the action, carving out the time for yourself to do these things so that you can mother from the most, what I like to say, like well-nourished place. So how can we connect with you? How can we work with you? And yeah, where can we learn more about you?
Well, thank you, Lauren. It's really fun to get to chat with another mama on all these things. And yeah, I currently am on Instagram most often, and that's Worth Wellness by Erica. So you can follow along there. And then I also have a podcast, the Crunchy Mom Club podcast, and am having so much fun interviewing since I've had my son, kind of switching gears with that and interviewing all the experts on all these topics when it comes to motherhood. And then my website is www.worthwellness.org, and you can find blog posts there, as well as you can go to Work with Erica to learn about what I have going on as far as one-on-one offerings. I have body partnership coaching, and then I'm also recently started offering support for natural birth preparation. I have just like the things that I've learned that we've talked about today, honestly, that in hindsight, I wish I would have had someone kind of walking with me through that, especially the deeper, more spiritual things and that sort of area of preparation that I could have had more of. So anyways, if that interests you, go ahead and you can check out my website, and all of that is going to be there.
Thank you for listening to another beautiful conversation about all the ways we can nourish ourselves, body, mind, and heart as well-nourished mothers. As always, please rate and review the show or share it with someone you love. It all helps this passion project bloom and grow, and I am oh so grateful for your support. Connect with Erica by heading to the show notes for all of her links, and don't forget to come join the conversation over on Instagram at Nest and Nourish. All right, see you next time.